Okay, now this is video 2. So by now you've probably got your data table set up and it's time to start collecting some data. So the first thing that you probably want to do is open the simulator. So go ahead and tap there, and you probably want to make this screen a little bit smaller. There's the simulator behind in my case. And I'd like to keep, personally, the instructions open over here so I can read them to the left while I'm looking at the simulator. So that's a good plan. Um, so right now it's still on overview, but I can switch to the carbon cycle lesson. So I'm going to do that. And there it is, the carbon cycle lesson and the questions that I need to answer at the end. So step 1 of this lab refers to the first table, table 1. So there are only 3 rows of data that you're going to collect from this simulation for step 1. And then step 2, you're going to look at data over several decades, and that's the longer table on that first page. So what exactly is this carbon cycle lesson, and how do you get at it? So if you go up here and click, you'll see that there are the 3 lessons. So you want to make sure you're on the carbon cycle lesson because the range of options are slightly different for each of the lessons. Here are the controls, so you can move time forward and backward. Here are 2 places where you can change values, but for lesson 1, or for lesson 1 step 1, you're not going to change those. And here it shows you what year you're at. So all the simulations in this cycle start at the year 2000, and it shows you in the year 2000 how much carbon was released from fossil fuel. So 6.9 gigatons. A gigaton is 10 to the 9th ton, so a whole bunch of carbon released in the year 2000. And then down here is a graph, and you can get values from the graph by just hovering over it. The purple line is the historical emissions of carbon. Here it is in parts per million in a particular year. This one assumes that 2000 is the last year we have real data for, and then everything after this, when you start running the model, will be a model, a projection, not actual data, but a mathematical projection. And you see here we've got clicked Show IS92A reference CO2 projection. That's a particular model that assumes lots of things about how much oil and gas we're going to be using, how much energy we're going to get from alternate sources, etc. So that is explained in the help section if you want more detail on that, but we're going to use this particular model. And then over here what they're showing you are the different reservoirs for carbon in the carbon cycle. So up here, each one of these gray blocks is 25 gigatons of carbon. You can add them up, or you can see here it's telling you there's 700 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere. So up here they're showing you the bathtub or the reservoir or the sink. All of those are the same for carbon in the atmosphere. They also show it to you in parts per million, because parts per million is the kind of concentration measurement that carbon dioxide in air is usually reported in. So these two are essentially reporting the same number, just in different units. You can think of it that way. Down here is the surface ocean reservoir, and you'll see there are 1,000 gigatons in 2000 in that reservoir. This plus sign, the second number, shows you how much it's increased in the preceding decade, so the preceding 10 years. And what they're saying here is it didn't increase significantly between 1990 and 2000. Here's the deep ocean, where most of this stuff is found, where most of the carbon is. And you'll see there's a big hunk of it and not very much of an increase in the deep ocean reservoir. Okay, let's go up here. Here's the terrestrial plants, and you'll see it's almost the same amount as you would find in the atmosphere, that is 700 gigatons. The soil is another carbon reservoir where all dead plants and other material goes, and decomposers start to decompose it, and carbon accumulates in the soil. So there are 1,800 gigatons in 2000 in the soil, plus 200 that were added in the decade 1990 to 2000. So what that means is there's there's 2,000 gigatons in the soil by the year 2000. But what this plus 200 does is just tell you what was happening in the decade before. So then we get to this coal and oil and gas. So this takes a moment to step back from the model and think about if there were no human interventions, this model would be balanced. That is to say, the amount of carbon that goes up into the atmosphere would be absorbed by the ocean and these other sinks, so that there'd be a constant amount in each of these sinks. That would be a balanced carbon cycle. But since humans have started digging up coal, oil, and gas that were locked in the lithosphere and burning it for energy, they've produced another source of atmospheric carbon as carbon dioxide, and that will show up here in this little puffy thing over the this smokestack, and that amount unbalances the carbon cycle, but it takes a while, and it's taken up differently in each of these reservoirs, like the atmosphere, the ocean, the deep ocean, etc. So this model is going to look at what's the impact over time of pulling this carbon out of the lithospheric reservoir and putting it up into the atmosphere. How would that unbalance it? And of course, if you're looking at the year 2050 or the year 2100, you're speculating. You don't really know. You just know what reasonable assumptions would give you. So your job in this first lesson is to run the model. So you click up here to run the model. First of all, record it at 2000. So all the values that are in these reservoirs record in the table for 2000. And you see here the rate of change in fossil fuel use is going to be a constant percentage. So constant percent increase in the amount of fossil fuel consumption. And so you're going to run the model up to 2050. And every time you click this button, see down here there's a change, you get a decade of change. And now you can see this is 75 gigatons of fossil fuel has been burnt. That's gigatons of or massive carbon that's been removed from the lithosphere and put into the atmosphere by humans burning fossil fuels. Also, you can see how much the concentration in the atmosphere has changed, both in gigatons and parts per million. In the ocean, relatively small change, but still noticeable in the ocean. And you'll see it, you start to generate these little blocks because they're the symbol. You'll notice that coal, oil, and gas have gone down slightly because there's a fixed amount in the lithosphere, and as we pull it out, there's less and less available. And so you would write down all those numbers. That would be, you need to go up to 2050. So you can see here, it says 2050. And you need to write down all these numbers and put them in your table and answer the questions. And then you would go up to 2100 and answer the questions. So I'm going to stop now and let you do this part of the lab.